All right. So hello, everybody, and welcome. Just to make sure you're in the right place, this is a panel discussion on how to strengthen industrial and academic collaborations in the bioscience sector. I believe we're still waiting on one panelist, so we might take a second here to get started. But what we're going to do is we are going to do a quick introduction of the two organizations that are hosting this panel, and then we're going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and then get into your burning questions. So you're welcome to post those in the chat as they come up, and we can go ahead and read them out. If there's also a little lull in the conversation, you're also welcome to unmute and ask your question as well. So Stephanie, just let me know when we want to go ahead and get started.
All right. I have a strange carryover. That's right. Okay, I think that it's good to begin with our introductions, and hopefully Ben will be able to join before the panel gets started. Yeah, let's go with that. So take it away, Michael.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Prossnitz. I am the program manager for the Ascend Hub. That stands for Accelerating Solutions for Commercialization and Entrepreneurial Development. You can go next slide. So Ascend is a NIH-funded program with the aim of increasing entrepreneurship and commercialization of basic medical science within the Mountain West IDEA states. These are states that typically receive less funding than their counterpart states. So for us, that includes Hawaii, Alaska, Nevada, New Mexico, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and I believe, yeah, that was it. And you can see the organizations we work with on the right. We are mostly focused on academic entrepreneurship and commercialization, but we do have some resources outside of that as well. Next slide. So first resource, we have a website, ascendhub.org. And of note on there, we have a biomedical resource database. That database includes, things from local to the federal level of funding, investment, IP information, anything you would need like that. We also host a monthly webinar series. All our webinars are recorded and posted on our website. They cover, same topics that I just mentioned before. And we have our next webinar coming up next Thursday on funding specifically for the NIH. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and send me a message. We run a commercialization course a couple times a year. We will be running our next one in about a couple months here in June. Oops, there you go. And that covers the basic information you would need if you're considering going into the commercialization process. So again, that's IP, funding, investment, all that fun stuff. And then lastly, we offer some one-on-one business advising as well as some one-on-one mentoring in the form of office hours. Again, if you're interested in either of those, you can go ahead and send me a message. And then lastly, we run a, or I guess I should say we sponsor a program through New Mexico State University called ACSA, that's Arrowhead Center SBIR Accelerator. It's a 12-week cohort that takes you from start to finish of writing an SBIR STTR application. And I believe that is it for me, so I'll pass it over to Stephanie.
And I did just share Michael's email address in the chat.
Yes. All right.
My email address is there as well. So I am the executive director of the New Mexico BioScience Authority. We are a state organization that was developed in 2017 through the legislation. We are administratively attached to UNM, and so I am still a UNM employee for any of you who knew me in my previous role in the Research Development Office. We have a 13-member board. One of our board members is on our panel today, Prisca Tiasse. And this board represents all sectors of New Mexico, including the 3 research universities, the Economic Development Department, Spaceport, and Industry. And it also is made up of board members from different pieces of the state, so including the South, the North, Los Alamos, the Central, Socorro, all of those places are included, which is really great. We get a great perspective of what is needed in the state and how we can move forward. We have some current initiatives that we're working on, including our community readiness program, our co-investment program, our SBIR STTR Bioscience Business Accelerator, which is actually a partnership with the Ascend program that Michael just talked about, as a way to expand their reach to all of New Mexico and not just focused on the research universities. Our last piece is just the centralization of statewide resources. Our website right now is nmbioscience.org. We have quite a few resources and options that are there, but we are working to redesign it as we go along and we learn more about what is needed by the state and what is needed by the individual entrepreneur, inventor, or investor. You can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have a listserv account through UNM. You can sign up for it through our contact us page. Or like I said, I'm the executive director. My email address is there, or our program specialist is Sterling Nichols. He's also on in the audience, and his email address is there as well. These are our board members. You can see that they are ranging from all different pieces, and then there is the staff. And now we'd like to introduce our panelists. So thank you so much all for volunteering your time to join us today.
All right, so I'll just quickly run through this and then we can do a more of a detailed introduction at yourselves. But today we are joined by John Chavez, who is the Managing Director of New Mexico Startup Factory, Steve Graves, who is the CEO and President of BennuBio, Dave Hanson, who is the Co-founder and Chief Development and Innovation Officer for GrowVera, Ben Lucker, who is the Chief Science Officer for Procell Biosciences, Eric Prossnitz, who is a professor in the School of Medicine at UNM, as well as the Principal Investigator for the Ascend Hub, and then Prisca Tiasse, who is the founder and president of the Community Lab. So we'll just go ahead and start with the top. John, if you want to do a quick 1-minute introduction.
Sure, great, thanks. Glad everybody's here today. John Chavez, Managing Director of the New Mexico Startup Factory. Startup Factory has 2 goals. One is to create investable companies from technology that we source from institutions such as UNM, Cedars-Sinai, NASA, Llano, Sandia. And then our second goal is the education of entrepreneurs regarding starting up companies and technology transfer. We currently have a contract with Los Alamos National Labs and with the Ascend Hub program to do that kind of education. So thanks for being here.
All right, thanks, John. Steve? Steve, I think you're muted, Steve. Oh, and then you turn it on and off real quick.
Sorry, there we go. Hopefully I'm unmuted now. I'm the president and CEO of BennuBio. I'm also a professor at UNM on leave. We've been working really hard to commercialize some high throughput flow cytometry technology out of the University of New Mexico with me as CEO. We're having a fair amount of success, and so I'll be happy to talk.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Hanson. I'm with GrowVera, but also at UNM. I'm a professor of biology and the assistant vice president for research. And we've been working on our technologies that we developed originally through ARPA-E funding to UNM and Sandia National Labs, dealing with plant microneedle sensors on plants to monitor water status and needs. So that's our main focus. And so GrowVera is then a company that we've developed a commercial research project that we've been selling so far and are expanding our services in.
Great, thank you, Dave. Ben?
Yeah. Hi, Ben Luker. I'm the CSO at Procell Biosciences. We're a very early stage startup out of Santa Fe, working on developing algae as a platform for high value proteins. So I'll leave it there.
Great, thanks, Ben. Eric?
Hello, everyone. Eric Prossnitz. I'm a professor here at UNM in the Department of Internal Medicine. I'm also a program leader in the Cancer Center and involved in the Clinical Translational Science Center. My experience in this area really comes from an academic point of view, I guess, having been first a professor really with probably few aspirations of developing technologies in my early days, at least, to sort of just learning the process just over many, many years to the stage now where I'm involved, for instance, as the UNMPI for the SEND Hub, where I'm working to help faculty in other states develop their technologies. Along with a large group. We do that also within the Clinical Translational Science Center here at UNM. And so I think I can bring that perspective from the academic investigator regarding challenges and successes and perhaps failures in those areas. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Eric. And then last, Prisca.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Prisca Tiasse. I am in Los Alamos. I'm actually a former Los Alamos National Laboratory scientist. I founded a small biotech company in Los Alamos almost 6 years ago. We're developing a couple of patented technology. One is an alternative to flow cytometry. So I actually would like to talk to Steve Grace at some point because it's not optic based. And another technology that detects actively infectious diseases in wastewater. And just so for the little story, the reason why I'm also a newer board member of the New Mexico BioScience Authority. And for this little story, the reason why I'm actually very interested in this particular panel and anything that improves industrial and academic collaborations is that I found that it was actually, a little difficult in New Mexico. So when we started our company, we realized we actually had to start building our own little ecosystem locally. So I'd love to hear your experience with that.
Great, thank you. All right, so we are now at the question stage. So if anybody has questions, you're welcome to either put them in the chat, or again, you can unmute and ask your question as well. We'll give it maybe 30 seconds to see if anybody asks to start, and then go from there.
So Anita Grierson has asked, as the director for UNM's Grand Challenges program, I'm working with new and growing interdisciplinary research teams. My question for this group: what are your recommendations for how and when to work with these teams to develop an entrepreneurial mindset and encourage a culture of entrepreneurship?
Well, I'll jump in there a little bit again from the faculty perspective, since the Grand Challenges is based here at UNM, at least predominantly. We have, and we make efforts here at the Health Science Center, at least, to we offer both team science, a short team science course, and a commercialization course, which we've just revamped into sort of 2 steps because we realize people have different levels of knowledge. And so for instance, for commercialization, it's a 101 and 102. 101 is really the very early basics. For example, a new faculty member who's hired that comes from a background where they didn't have any exposure to even the concept really of commercializing their, we'll call them technologies, but their research. And so it's really aimed at just getting them to be cognizant of the fact that what they do may have commercial potential. And if they develop something along those lines, to make sure they talk to folks at Rainforest Innovations, for example, before going to public with too much information, those sorts of things. The second step of that then is if you are further along that path, but a little bit more nuts and bolts of either starting a company or working with others to start a company, or perhaps already fundraising and those sorts of things. So I think, I mean, the question was, what's the recommendation for how and when? I think that what we've discovered is, we had a longer course and we've shortened it just to make it short and sweet for the faculty to try and get more participation. It's always a hard thing to do here with people having so many challenges besides grant challenges in their daily lives to participate in a 6-week course that has multiple hours a week of involvement and so forth. So we keep it really short and sweet and just try and hit the essentials. I think we all know that usually you forget a lot of those things, so there's the opportunity then to so for us, an example being that if you just are providing that 101 exposure to commercialization, a lot of faculty will say, well, what I do isn't commercializable. And the point I always like to make in return is, well, you're applying for grants to the NIH. The goal of the NIH is to improve the health of the US population. You can only do that in most cases when your research can perhaps become commercialized, because just making it available, just publishing it doesn't necessarily put it into practice or put it in the clinic or put it in the community where people can benefit from it. So, but they may not be anywhere near that stage yet. And then 3 years later, they may think of, or their research may be heading in a direction where they think, oh, this could actually be a therapeutic or something else. And then they need to come back and revisit everything they may have heard before, because they will have surely forgotten much of it, but at least you want to put that idea in their head. So I'll leave it there and let others. I see John wants to talk and so is Dave.
So real quickly, I think at a more granular perspective, what I would encourage a PI or a postdoc is to go out into the entrepreneurial community and just show up. Show up at Million Cups, show up at New Mexico Bio, show up at the New Mexico Angels, show up at New Mexico. So there's all these groups that you can make connections to that will help you either validate your thesis or say, maybe you should look down, do a different path. And the resources in New Mexico are wide and numerous. And so there's really a lot of good people that are willing to help entrepreneurs and postdocs and PIs trying to figure out how to move their idea from bench into the marketplace. And secondly, it takes a team. No one individual can do this. And so when we look at investments from an investment perspective, it's not about the technology, it's about the team. And you can find those teammates out in the community to do stuff. So.
Okay, and Dave, you have your hand raised, so please
Yes.
continue.
Yeah, so and I agree with what's been said, and for me, I think as far as assembling the Grand Challenge teams, I would really think that it'd be good if they're willing, or to suggest that even from the beginning that they start to have someone on their team that's working with the Innovation Academy or Rainforest, ideally even both, to realize that they have a person that they're going to start having these conversations with, and maybe some will jump up and will really want to run with it, and others won't be sure, but until they start having a mechanism to realize to have the conversations for what that is, what it means to get in that space, they'll just be, it won't be in their minds enough. So I think they should just get started right away with that.
And Prisca and Steve also have contributions. So Prisca, please.
Yes, this is more anecdotal, but so I mentioned earlier that we started building our own little ecosystem in Los Alamos. And I would say to that question, as early as possible. So we also had started a nonprofit where we actually go into to schools and, kind of raise awareness about biosciences, what's possible, what people can do. And we even read scientific papers. And at the end is, what can you do with this technology? And they have tons of ideas, even starting in middle school. So, just trying to think of not just, hey, this is cool. What can we do with that? How can this serve the populations? I would say as early as possible, whichever way you can.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, so I have, looking at the question from what to recommend for like the Grand Challenges team to, what they might do. My experience is that researchers have a very abstract concept of commercialization, and really asking them to go out and talk to people is a little bit difficult for them. And so one of the things I think that really we've had a fair amount of success in acoustic flow cytometry technology export from the state of New Mexico. And one of the most important things that happened in that entire process is early on the stage of acoustic cytometry systems, where it was all coming out of Los Alamos. Los Alamos had a program where they had entrepreneurs in residence. And in the absence of having an entrepreneur in residence and people who are actively looking to commercialize technology, not the scientists looking to commercialize technology, an entrepreneur that was looking at science that could be commercialized from the inside out, from the institution's perspective to take it out. None of the successes in flow cytometry, acoustic cytometry would have happened. And so I really encourage places like UNM to consider like entrepreneurs in residence to actually go from the inside out and lead the technology charge out, rather than expecting the scientists who are total newbies at this to do this. You'll eventually grow a bunch of scientists that can do this, but looking for a few key players to help out and sponsoring them internally would be a well-placed investment.
And Ben, I also see you with your hand up.
Yeah, and one thing I would think is, when you're growing your team, when you're putting it together, it's one thing to say, take the team to an angels meeting or encourage that, but another thing you can do is bring somebody that specializes in business to your team and start to bring up the mindset of how do you maximize the impact of your research. And as I think Eric mentioned, that commercialization of your research is the best way to make a big impact. And that's what NIH or NSF wants. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll just jump in since I don't see a hand up. And I agree with Steve sort of, which commenting on John's comment, just to, faculty, especially at the earliest stages of thinking about this, probably won't jump right into going to an angels meeting. I don't think it's because they're antisocial, but it's just outside their experience sort of for what they're, just what they're used to. I've had a couple faculty in about the last year, just come to me because they sort of know that I do some of this stuff and they've heard about it. And again, they just want to have a one-on-one talk to, just to hear some of the very basics with another faculty member. So I agree, I think with Steve, either having entrepreneurs in residence that maybe are also faculty, or have a faculty resource of, list of folks who have done this to some extent for other faculty to talk to. Again, the two examples of people that have talked to me, one was very eager to get commercialization going and a company, and again, and maybe Steve can talk to this too, at an academic institution, we also have to manage conflicts of interest, which for faculty that want to be involved in commercialization activities, it's also a little different on quote main campus from the HSC, what can happen. So there's some very complex conversations that need to get started regarding some of those issues too, and meetings with conflict of interest committees and chairs and so forth.
So we did have another question through the chat. It was directly to me, so I don't think you guys saw it, but it says, to the commercial participants, how and what did you find most useful in making a cooperative outreach to UNM? To the faculty members, what have you seen as most practical ways for potential business people to reach the university? And just to clarify that, Ben and Prisca are our outside entrepreneurs who I do not believe have, I do not believe you have connections with UNM at this time. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think that just maybe talking about your experiences with other universities and maybe, like what can happen for UNM to be more involved in that. And then for the faculty, what are the most practical ways potential business people can reach the university? Those would be the questions to ask. Would anyone like to go first? Prisca, thank you so much.
Yeah, my personal experience is that coming from the outside of an institution, it's extremely hard to even make a connection with the faculty. What I end up just doing is just go through my network, and I've had to collaborate out of state. So if that'd be nice if there was sort of a pipeline or a formal way to contact faculty that may be good collaborators or may be interested in your research that would, kind of streamline the process.
Dave and Eric, looking at you guys. Ben, do you have something to contribute to that?
Yeah. So one way I've operated that is to reach out through the technology transfer office or the business development office and express, so if there's IP that's been covered by faculty and you want to see if there's an option to license that, you can go through a tech transfer office and engage with them and get a warm introduction to a researcher. That's one way to do it. At least that's worked for me in the past. So.
Dave.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. I mean, I'll start. There's a couple things I want to say. One is, the way that I made connections with the external company. But we spent, a couple years through the RPE funding. I had funding, talking to companies that might, might want to interact. So those are our outward efforts through those grants. We made our connection with a local company because a postdoc of mine was, playing in local sports with someone from that company, and they were sitting around having beers, talking about what they did. And my postdoc heard about this electronics company, what they were doing, and made that connections for us. Right? That's just way too happenstance to grow. And so, but that's how it sort of happened. And I do want, my role at UNM in the VPR's office, we actually do want to try to implement a better way to interface that. When we were talking about making just very soon upgrading the website to at least have some better links, but I would really like to have suggestions or comments from people emailing me or here to how ways to do that. The kind of things better, the things that Prisca was talking about, because it's really hard to make that connection. And I know people are looking in from the outside. I talk to other small businesses, and it's hard to make that connection, harder than it should be.
Okay, and a comment said President Stokes's ethics task force is evaluating harmonization of conflict of interest and conflict of commitment enforcement at UNM. So Dr. Prossnitz's comment is timely. And then did we have anyone else who would be able to comment on the earlier question? Because I did receive an additional question through the chat as well.
So, again, from the faculty perspective, I think it's really important to reach out to Rainforest, to folks there. They have a specialist in the life sciences and a specialist in the engineering area, or physical sciences, I guess, in engineering. To try and be more accurate. I think in general, the number of disclosures at Rainforest are something like 55 to 60% out of, and Steve can maybe correct me on this, from engineering. 40 something maybe percent from HSC, and the rest is sort of from chemistry and some other areas. But at the earliest possible opportunity, these folks, these two individuals also walk the halls sort of the campus and try and not during COVID time so much, but otherwise, poke their heads in labs and try and make those connections, especially with folks that aren't already, talking to them or engaged with them, and just ask them about their research and do some of that we do through other activities, for instance, here at the HSC. So it's really important to reach out to them at the earliest time. Make sure you get that provisional patent submitted or the invention disclosure first, of course, so you can have a paper trail and document the invention itself, and then in most cases that leads to a provisional, and then you've got that year to work out the details of the non-provisional and whether or not it'll move forward, and but often, of course, what happens is faculty reach out to Rainforest saying, I'm going to a conference tomorrow where I'm presenting this stuff, and it occurred to me maybe I should file an invention disclosure. Well, if you're talking about it tomorrow or in 2 days, that doesn't give them a lot of opportunity to do a good job on a provisional. So, the point being, just talk to them early and perhaps often. You won't offend them by talking to them too much. That's what they're there for, and they can be really helpful.
And then Prisca asked a follow-up question in the chat. How does one incentivize scientists or faculty members to get into entrepreneurships or partner with companies, since it does take extra work? So maybe the question could be, are there any incentives for UNM faculty to work with entrepreneurs or partner with companies at this time, or what is is that a consideration that could be on the table at least?
So this is John, and really glad to have this question, because we have a company that is out of the engineering department where the PI is actually an owner and an employee of the company, whereas we have another company that's out of UNMH that a really great PI, but he can't take any equity and he can't get paid. So you have a really funky, what I call the Lomas factor. If you're north of Lomas, you can't get equity and you can't be a part of the company. If you're south of Lomas, you can get equity and be an active partner in there. So I think there's companies like ours out here that want to provide those incentives. Equity is a really good tool to provide incentives to not only employees, but founders and PIs. But if we're not able to do that because of conflict of interest, it's really a challenge to incentivize someone who has really cool technology that would rather not take it to the market because they're not going to be incentivized and not own a piece of the company.
And really fast before I call in Eric, I'm so sorry. I was wondering if Steve had any input into this, since Steve, you did. Because
I certainly am in the embodiment of the Lomas situation, right? So I'm able to be president and CEO because I'm south of Lomas. But at any rate, but I'm also on complete leave to avoid conflict of interest at this point. But long story short, I mean, there's two types of interactions that are, one of which we talk about, and it gets a lot of play, is the incentivization of someone to commercialize their own technology as a faculty member. And that's a separate problem from what I see a lot of small companies have, which is they have their technology, and what they want to do is access expertise to get some initial work done, use the university as a scientific or engineering resource to prove a principle without building a whole engineering team. And that's more of a contract-based type of work. I was David's predecessor at the VPR's office. And one of the things that has come across is, how do you do those contracts? The university has not spelled out really good language to which people can come in and get simple contracts or get them funded. Again, I'll draw from Los Alamos. They have, or Sandia, the New Mexico Small Business Association has a program by which you can get national labs, Sandia or Los Alamos, to do work for you. And those researchers are incentivized because they get additional low-cost funding for their personnel to do that. The IP is always an issue. They never want any new IP to be developed because that's what is the problem, okay? And so we just never develop IP on those contracts. But those sort of programs don't exist at the university. If you want to come in and contract a university person to do work, there's no straightforward path at this point to do that. And it's largely because of the IP issues. And working directly on that as a larger institution actually would help the surrounding community immensely. And the way that you incentivize faculty is that if there is funding from the sponsors, because the sponsor would be the company, which the company would be glad to pay, I guarantee it, it just has to be done. I mean, it's just a legal problem that just needs to be worked out so people can understand how to contract for services. And I think that's something that would really help the surrounding community.
Hey, Eric, sorry to
Oh, no,
cut you off.
no problem at all. I mean, what I was going to back up to was just to say that, you know, the faculty express interests in a wide range. So I know folks up here at HSC who are willing to disclose their technologies and essentially want very little to do with it after that. So they'll disclose it, they'll let Rainforest, you know, file a patent and hopefully get the patent, and then sort of leave it to Rainforest to try and work commercialization or a licensing route to a company, or maybe create a company. But the faculty member doesn't want much to do with it sort of at that point. Others are willing to, you know, continue to provide their expertise in some way to help facilitate that process. And then there are other faculty, and I would say often they're some of the younger faculty who are perhaps, you know, have been more exposed to this, are super gung-ho and want to start a company and run the company and you know, do those sorts of things. So there's really a huge range in what faculty want, and this gets back to the incenting of I guess faculty involvement. I mean, of course, there's the fraction of royalties from Rainforest that can come back to the inventor. But I think most inventors realistically realize that most of the technologies, you know, that go through Rainforest probably won't be commercialized. I mean, there's a fraction of them that will, but a lot won't. And they always say, well, you know, I'll submit the invention disclosure, but I don't think this will, you know, go anywhere. Again, it may be a lack of vision on their side, and maybe Rainforest can figure out exactly where the niche is for this technology. And then, you know, again, the other extreme is those that are super gung-ho and want to, you know, start a company and run it. And I saw some comments about the conflict issues. There is a waiver process. It's not, from what I understand, you know, it's too straightforward. I mean, it has to go all the way up to President Stokes for approval, but with many steps in between and so forth. So I know that not many here at HSC bother doing that. And as far as the Conflict of Interest Committee goes, yes, their goal is to manage conflicts, because conflicts are not inherently a bad thing. They're actually a good thing because they mean something sort of good and important is happening. But often the response that people tell me they get is they tell me I can't do this, right? So, or I can't do, you know, I can't be involved with the company and BPI on a subaward or something from an STTR and these sorts of things. So people, you know, what we're trying to do is educate people, because their initial response and understanding is that I'm just being told I can't do it. And that's not all, you know, it's usually not the case, in fact. So there's still a lot of education that needs to go on. I'll stop there.
I think we got Ben next and then David.
Yeah, so, you know, the discussion of bringing in, you know, shares of the company to a PI is can be incentive, but in one aspect, one collaborator that we currently have, in our discussions, we realized that a big part of his incentive is the realization that most of his students are going into industry and he has zero experience in working with industry and doesn't, and so we're developing this great relationship, and it's very intellectual, but it's also, he's learning that in industry, you have all this IP landscape that has to be navigated. And those are real constraints to research and development that an academic doesn't have. And so bringing that kind of constraint into development and bringing in students and postdocs and priming them with that mindset so that they're not shocked when they enter industry is actually a reasonable incentive in itself. But we'll leave it there.
Yeah, so I would just add in, I mean, so for me, I got into this because, there was a federal grant opportunity from ARPA-E that when you apply for it, you're going to develop your technology, an idea, right? And then you're supposed to commercialize it. But it was sort of two-step, and we seem to be going, a lot from, I have an idea that I'm going to disclose to I'm going to create a company and commercialize it. And that's a huge gulf to go across. I think most of the people in the RPE program in the team we had were like, okay, we have an idea that we think could be commercialized. We've talked about that, but we're going to get paid right now and support directly to develop the idea, right? So we can certainly support at trying to have more funding that just does that part. And then the time comes in the grant where it was a cooperative agreement where you'd say, okay, this idea is working, it's going fast, it looks like it go towards a commercialization route. Who's going to do that, and do you want to do that, right? Both two things. And that's sort of the next step where you really there's a lot of training that's where a lot of the training comes in, and a lot of other issues around conflict of interest really also come up, which is it's just that multi-step kind of process is needed, and people may fall off. A bunch of the people in the program that I was with, they were like, no, I don't really want to actually commercialize anything, right? I just wanted to bring it up to where it would be commercializable. And then, myself and some others started saying, well, we might want to. It was super hard. The Sandia people have the same problem that HSC has. If they're going to actually commercialize it, they have to take leave, right? Huge problem for them. My problem, too, was on the conflict side, which I didn't appreciate at the beginning, is I was always told to commercialize something, you should work on something that you're really excited, that you really want, right? So this is a piece of equipment I wanted to use in my research for the rest of my life and change that, right? I wanted it in my lab. And the only way I was going to get it is by commercializing it. But as soon as you do that, then it's really hard for me to buy it in my lab, right? We've got to go through this process that was mentioned before of going in an exception all the way up to the president, which is not a clear process, which is something I hope to clarify, make it more clear to do that, because it's a complete, it's a nightmare to think I've just invented something that's fantastic and I want to use it for my research forever. And if I do, I'm going to go to federal prison, right? You don't have to go there, but that's immediately like, oh crap.
At least UNM prison.
Yeah, right.
So Dave, I think that you really took a first hit on this question that came into me, but it was talking about how faculty do align their, so the question is, how well do faculty perceptions of needs and solutions align or not with business needs and solutions? How have faculty had to adapt their approach based on these differences? So I think that you definitely touched on that quite a bit. Did anyone else have anything that they could contribute before we go to Anna, who has raised her hand?
So just real quick, we always have an expectation document with the PIs that we work with, so that we put in writing their expectations of what they want out of the company and our expectations of what role that they are going to have within the company. So trying to align everybody's interests so that as you move down the value path, everybody knows exactly what's going on.
you know, in developing instrumentation for commercialization, you know, from an academic standpoint, I think it's really important to bring in the concept of this is going to be commercialized from the get-go, design implications, and just like even how you, and it doesn't need to be necessarily with instrumentation, it can be with life science as well, but there is a big gap between making something work, like one or two things, versus designing something so that it can be mass produced and commercialized. And having those discussions very early in a project is critical, because if you're pushing forward for the mindset of like, I just need a couple of these things to work with bubble gum and duct tape, you can do that. But then to step back for, you know, a year and a half of research and go back to square one is really problematic. So it's just something that needs to be thought of early.
I actually will just say one other thing that to also go with what both Ben and Steve were saying too, is that, you know, I think it's really important if faculty want to get to know what it's like to work with industry. So Ben, you know, one of the reasons I started doing this is for the exact reason you said, is my PhD advisor could just said to me when I started, well, I can teach you how to get my job, but that's it. And I wanted to be able to say to my students, well, I can teach you how to do my job, or my job is you know, interact with industry or be an entrepreneur. And that the first step was interacting with industry, and that was doing things like talking with potential with people you have expertise with companies at meetings, and then starting to have service contracts with them to just you know, work up with their instrumentation. Or in a lot of our cases was they would lend us instruments that we could get to our students to use sort of the first to get cutting edge technology, and just agree to share the data, right? So you start to have these interactions, and you learn what the company needs, you know, what industries want, and then you hopefully get the chance where we have the kind of conversations like Ben's talking about what does it mean to make a commercial device versus your little lab device that you stuck together, because it's a huge, whole nother world.
Okay, Anna, please ask your question.
Hey, actually, it's more of a comment than a question, because I do run the conflict of interest in research program on main campus and the branches. So I am stunned to find out that people here do not know, perhaps, that not every startup has to go through the COI complicated waiver process. So we do think we need to educate quite a bit. From my perspective, you know, I don't see many companies which have gone through the E80 process up until 2016. And we've had a few, and they've been successful. And STC or Rainforest Innovations now would determine which startups have to go through this process based on the criterion on whether there is a substantial interest or a lesser than substantial interest that a UNM employee has in the company, right? So, you know, we have a lot to do on education. Where we struggle is the touch points in the process, let's say, in some formalized structure of commercialization. Where are the people willing to hear the information about COI and compliance? Because at the end of the day, you know, we offer programs, we offer customized trainings, but we don't get too many people coming in. So I could really benefit from knowing that. And I think that would improve what really essentially is lack of information on access, because we have templates, we have, you know, the processes, and not only that E80 policy, but other policies call for, you know, that process up to the president, and then various UNM offices have to endorse it. So it is robust and clunky, but that's where it is built on very complicated laws, which will keep you out of jail. But but nobody's going to go to jail for COI, at least at UNM. I can reassure you that, unless it deals with procurement and you're influencing procurement of federal funds. Stay out of that. That's your jail, a free out of jail card. But we're here, we want to work. As I said, our new VPR's motto is research and education, and we're actively bolstering our, you know, information dissemination methods. So let us know. Thank you.
Eric, I see your hand raised, and then we have another audience member
Yeah.
with their hand raised.
So I was going to just make 2 points that, for instance, again, I mean, the difference in the COIs between the two sides of Lomas, again, for instance, up here, the concept is that, you know, an officer of a company has a fiduciary responsibility to that company. That is in opposition to your, I don't want to call it fiduciary responsibility to UNM, but your primary role as a UNM faculty, that you can't have two primary roles, essentially, right? That's sort of how it's viewed here. Now, again, you can get the exemption and so forth, but that's where we start here, is that you can't have these two simultaneous primary responsibilities, one to UNM and then one to a company. The other point I was going to make, talking a little bit about moving technologies, you know, forward into, we'll just call it into being. I mean, we have a strong bio focus, I guess, on the session today, which is, and the point being that, and the engineers will scoff at me because I know Steve's been working on his things for many, many years, right? But in the bio world often, and I'll just speak from personal experience, I mean, we filed a patent on some compounds that we had discovered in 2005. The patent issued in 11. We spent many years talking to many different companies along the way until one took a license then and formed and took a license in, I think it was 16. And the first, a phase 1 trial actually started in 2019. So we're talking about a 14-year span from filing the patent on these compounds to actually a phase 1 trial getting going. And so in the bio world, that's not atypical, right? They're very long terms. And of course, the company has had to raise tens of millions of dollars along the way too. So it's also, you know, very expensive, for instance. Now, some bio things don't, you know, necessarily cost those sorts of dollars, but if it's a drug that's going to go into a person, for example, it's a arduous and difficult path forward. And some, I maybe Steve can comment, I mean, some engineering technologies, I think, as they're patented, are almost viable immediately. Sure, they need improvement or maybe some further development, but in the bio world, we often have to patent things before we even know what they're good for, but you have to state the patent out already. And then it takes years really to figure out a target or a disease, for instance, that it may be useful for. So, but if you wait till then they say, well, then it's obvious, right? Because then it was already, you know, if you wait too long, right, you have the obviousness battle with the patent office. And so anyways, that's a challenge in the bio area that I think many of us face.
I'm going to jump in real quick, just because, I mean, the basic premise that you can't be an officer of the company and an employee at UNM is something I would push back on a little bit. So, I mean, UNM is different than a national laboratory. It has a definite mission in economic development. It's stated within numbers of documents within the state legislature. We are supposed to be an engine for economic development. There can be synergy between the university goals and a corporation's goals. I don't necessarily want to have it accepted that you can't do both, because I think there's numbers of examples of this across the country where institutions allow people to do both with appropriate management, and it's for the betterment of the institution and the industry. That being said, I also think that that's a lesson to be, I mean, the length of time it takes to get something commercialized is immediately related to the amount of time the initial inventor can have in the commercialization. In engineering, it's very simple for a PI to participate and start pushing the commercial aspects of things. And some of these drugs and these drug compounds are in similar ways. They would benefit immediately from going the SBIR route, which is a much easier way to get funding, which would encourage a whole bunch more effort on this in a commercial sense. And the most appropriate person to lead that quite often is the same person that did the research at the faculty level. And so I think that they're tied. It's not only the types of research, but it's also the approach that engineering has taken towards this. And the example that I'd give is the company that John is working with, Sang Han's company. Sang's out there writing proposals, getting funding for the company to get the thing going, just as I did. And I think it's very important to allow faculty to do that. And I think that the university as a whole should look at other institutions across the country which routinely do this. And I think it's because we sit in a national lab atmosphere, which has a different mission, okay? The national labs have a different mission than a state university, that our conflict of interest policy gets a little confounded compared to what other things like the UC system routinely do. And I'll get off my soapbox.
And just before Ashraf gets on, because I know he's had his hand up for a while, Steve, I think you know too that the HSC is a little different in its stance on that officer, because it's the officer issue. It's not that you can't be involved with the company, you can be an advisor, but you can't be an officer, and that's where they
and that's what I'm explicitly pushing back on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Ashraf Nuruddin, research professor at the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering. My question is a little bit more related to the bioscience, and a part of it has been responded to. So let's suppose that we have a technology that in my vision, it is cool technology and it's protected by the UNM innovation, rainforest innovations. What makes it also appealing for the investors, or what are the conditions for the investors to see it also a cool technology? Should we have like prestigious papers published on it? Or can we just show up? Like, for example, John said at the beginning, we can show up at the Angels or the bioscience and tell them that we have this technology. So what are the conditions for the investors to see this technology as cool and commercial? Thank you.
So real quickly, we look at 5 things. We look at the team. And so it would be you and whoever else is working on it. The IP, if it's protected, the scalability of the product. So can you scale it and sell tons of them? The market, how big is the market? And then the 5th one is the team. So those are the 5 things that we look at when we review an investment.
And in my experience, where the academic side, where I have fallen short in that process in the past, is that the team quite often, from the academic side, we really emphasize the technical and we undervalue the commercial. And that's really a mistake. And so you really have to build your team commercially. And the idea of robustness and the need to make money has to be built at the core of the company. The idea that you're going to not make money for the investors, but you're going to make a huge impact on the world because it's a great thing for the world to have, that just doesn't sell in that environment. You have to hit the bottom line. You have to make money. And it's crass to say that, but when you're going to investors, you have to tell them how they're going to get a return on their dollar, and you have to be very clear and very much understand that pathway. And that's where having a strong commercial component of the team is very important.
And Steve, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
So just to emphasize that economic impact on the requirement, I have literally heard oil executives say, the petroleum products are damaging the planet, and algae biomass might be a viable option, but unless we can scale it and make money on it, we're going to continue down this path of destruction, right? So absolutely, the technology has to have economic viability.
And I was just going to say really quickly is that for me, and it's very daunting when I started as a scientist side to try to figure out that part. So that's why I partner with an outside company that knew how to do that, right? They do most they do these things, but they need my expertise and my value to actually, prove what it does and show that it can do what we want to do with it and make things fit when they come back in iterations of how to make it economically viable. So it's you don't have to do it all yourself as the scientist. And you shouldn't.
And Prisca, you added the note that team building opportunities are important. Would you like to expand on that?
I guess if you're, like most PhDs are really have tunnel vision, and that's probably due to the nature of, research, so it's actually quite a bit of a challenge to even think of getting into entrepreneurship. So then and the aspect of that is, I don't want to say that most PhDs are not very social, but networking is a challenge. Let's just face it. So considering the fact that John Chavez just mentioned that one of the first things they look for is the team, I don't feel like there are enough team building opportunities for a scientist who would like to even consider getting into entrepreneurship. Okay, you can have a lot of resources, you can learn, there's lots of seminars, but how do you find, like the people you could work with, like some kind of matchmaking opportunities? That's sort of like what I think would be ideal. I don't know how it would really work concretely, but that's something that to keep in mind.
I would echo that. I think from the community partner side, from the companies that are looking for opportunities to partner with researchers, it's hard to understand precisely what different researchers are working on and how you might be able to align with their focus areas. And so it was a question I was going to ask too, is how do we connect with each other, especially in biosciences? There's not a lot of SBIRs out there for bioscience. There's some STTRs, but how do we connect with each other and form teams in New Mexico?
Well, on that note, I would market us. So we're the New Mexico BioScience Authority, and I would just really love to encourage you to follow us on social media, get onto our listserv. That is one of our missions, is to try to put those pieces together more effectively. And we've been identifying resources across the state, including the New Mexico Startup Factory that John is leading, and the New Mexico Angels that he laid the foundation for, and just a lot of different pieces that are able to help build those connections. For the SBIR, STTR opportunities, we also work with New Mexico FAST because of our partnership with Ascend, and they provide a lot of cohorts that are training people to be able to put together strong SBIR and STTR proposals. And something that we've worked with New Mexico FAST to do is to help make sure that the opportunities that they have that may not look like they are bioscience related, but could be bioscience related, like the Department of Energy has got actually a lot of opportunities for bioscience related projects. You just have to know where to search into it. And so a partnership with New Mexico FAST has been able to help us market those a little bit better. Yes, and John, I wanted to tell you too that link did not work that you just shared. I shared it as well.
I just looked at it. It's supposed to be Disrupt Tech. The T is supposed to be an R, I believe. That's correct, John.
I'm a finance guy, so I don't know how to write. Sorry.
All right. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much to all of the panelists. I really, really appreciate your time. We have recorded this, and so Irene has said that it will be shared with participants, and then we're also going to get the link to be able to post it on our website. And then I think that Ascend may also be doing that as well. So
yes, we will.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.